Welcome, friends, to Reality Test. What is reality testing, you may ask? Well, it's something we all do every day, maybe with our loved ones over dinner, with coworkers at the water cooler, etc., when we check our subjective or personal emotions, thoughts, and so forth against objective or sort of more agreed upon fact-based reality. Although, because Dr. Ray and I, Dr. Kay, are social constructionists, we don't actually believe there's one true objective reality, but rather our own personal versions of it constructed in the context of relationships. But you get the idea. So here in Reality Test, we're going to be testing the castmate realities and the producer antics of our favorite reality TV shows against what we know as licensed psychologists about the reality out here, off of our TVs. We hope you'll join us as we attempt to reality test. Listen, y'all, we have a lengthy version of our disclaimer in the show description text, also in our old episodes, but we do ethically need to at least include part of it at the start of each episode. So here's our briefest version of the disclaimer. If you've heard it before, you can skip ahead 30 seconds, or for the old episodes, 2 minutes. So although we're licensed psychologists, psychotherapists, supervisors in the context of our professional roles, we are not acting as therapists in the context of this pod, neither for you nor for the reality castmates we discuss. We will give our opinions as our whole human selves, albeit supported by our psychological knowledge, and we will talk about diagnoses rather than assigning them, as we cannot ethically assign diagnoses without formal psych assessment. But both the opinions and diagnoses we discuss might easily be erroneous, as we don't personally know the folks in reality TV shows. That's it. Thanks, y'all. Now check out our campy theme song.
Are you feeling stressed? Your head's all messed? Well, let's forget all the rest. Fuck it, we're blessed. Cause it's time to talk reality test. Come with us. Let's reality test.
Welcome to Reality Test. I'm Dr. Ray.
And I'm Dr. Kay. Feel free to check in and take a seat wherever you like. We're back. It's a new year. We're in 2025.
Maybe woo. I don't know. It's
questionable woo.
Face is coming into office. But
that was strong language to start us right off. I love it.
I said it. Coming in hot.
Coming in hot. It's coming in pleasantly aggressive to the new year.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
That's our lane. Pleasantly aggressive.
Exactly. I love it. It's so true, too. It's right on the nose. And also what you said is right on the nose as well. And there is a real woot woot question mark to this year. Ideally it's a new year, new, good things to happen. But as far as the country goes, it's scary. Every time, everything that happened on New Year's Eve, I was like, so is this because, it's and then what's the next thing we can expect? And it's scary.
Very scary world we are living in right now.
Yeah. So it makes this kind of thing our pleasant cubby corner of pleasantry is even more important, and sort of needing to have a little bit of an escape at times.
To cultivate a little bit of joy, which is a bit radical, I think.
Radical joy.
Radical joy. We love it.
True. That's so true. It's resistance. Joy is resistance.
I think so too. Absolutely. And people have talked more about this in ways much more profound than we are now. And yes, radical joy is so important. And I'm glad we are working to foster it here on this podcast.
Exactly that. And to that point, we have some exciting news today, but I'm going to dedicate my check-in to that so that we are using time wisely, because one of the things for our new year is that we are going to get better at time management. We have some nice lengthy podcasts for you all, which are juicy, but we're going to try to make them a little more manageable size, bite size, not bite size, maybe meal size.
Meal size. Yeah. I like that. Oh. Like a nice one course dinner with your grain, your protein, and your vegetable. That's what we're doing here on Reality Test.
I love it.
I don't know where I'm going with that.
Nope,
but,
I love it. We're metaphoring. We're metaphoring hard. And to your metaphorical point, I will say, why don't we start with the protein and the real joie de vivre, the thing that brings us a little bit of personal attachment also to the podcast, but to each other and to our listeners, which is our check-in period at the very beginning of our podcasts, where I would like to ask you, dear Dr. Ray, what is on your heart and mind today?
Okay. So I know you are a football fan. I know you do fantasy football, all that stuff.
By proxy.
I'm a fair weather Buckeye fan. Okay. I come by this very honestly. I am from Columbus and I was home for the holiday with my family who are all huge Buckeye fans. If you have ever stepped into Ohio, you know that the Buckeyes are pervasive. College football is everywhere. The Buckeyes are doing really well. And it's something that I was really into when I was younger and I lived there, and sometimes I fall off of it. And fair weather fan wise, I'm really excited to see them doing really well. And they have this college, I don't know very much about this, but college football has this new 12 person or 12 team playoff situation they're doing.
Okay.
And the Buckeyes were not ranked very high and have won 2 games and are now in the Final Four, which I'm really excited about.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, go Bucks. I'm back on my OH shit, if you will. Any fans from Ohio will know what I'm talking about, but it's very exciting. People are very excited in Columbus, Ohio, and the surrounding areas. So
right, it's like in the air.
Yeah, exactly. And it gets me reinvigorated with the Buckeyes. And I should just watch more regularly because it's fun, but it's certainly more fun when they're winning, let's be honest.
Absolutely. It's like, taking a loss can be depressing. So why open yourself up to that and watch football? Right. It could be depressing. I know 0% of anything about college football. So I've, I think, heard of the Buckeyes, but that's very exciting for you. And I know what that feels like when the atmosphere is, vibing with success on a sports team thing.
Yes. And they lost to Michigan this year, which they are one of the biggest rivalries, not in college football, but just even in general. They are a huge rivalry, to the point where it's gotten violent sometimes in the past in ways that are very scary.
Whoa.
But the Buckeyes lost to Michigan this year and have had a kind of losing streak against Michigan in the last couple of years, which has not been the norm in the last maybe 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
So people were really upset, but now things are turning around. So we'll see what happens.
That's so exciting. It's they paid their dues with Michigan. Now they can have some positive things.
Yes. So we'll see how it goes. More importantly, I'm so excited for you to deliver your check-in, which is also very exciting news about the podcast.
Exactly. I'm very excited. I will just add too that about the football piece as well. I was thinking about when it's in the air, that because we're in New England, I remember when the Patriots were, Tom Brady, whatever the F, things were going well there. And so everyone just had the stickers and the magnets and the whatever and stuff. So I totally can relate through that, but I do not know I'm not attached to any football college team. So I can be pro Buckeyes with you because that's not in any sort of conflict. So go Buckeyes.
Go
I will
Bucks.
also be fair weather because I know nothing about it, but it's very exciting. I will say too, I grew up very much, we have a very, my parents were teachers and stuff. They weren't really big, huge sports fans at all. So I grew up mostly also because of patriarchy kind of stuff, patriarchal, tons of sexual violence and also murder and stuff that happens in sports scenes, right? And sort of thinking about athletes that kind of run away with their privilege, if you will, and sort of being able to do whatever they want, kind of an idea. And that happens on school campuses too. And I find that still deeply, deeply problematic, where the teams are sort of treated as super students, they get extra allowances that other students don't get because they bring the school money through the sports teams doing well. So I find that deeply, deeply problematic. And also through my husband liking the Steelers, I've come to understand some of the more positive aspects of football and sort of getting to know him more through getting to know what it's like to be a football fan and sort of learning the history of this team because he's always been a diehard Steelers fan. So it's been kind of fun. It's cool to see I was definitely biased against football for most of my life. So it's interesting to feel myself sort of shifting in terms of being able to see something as more whole object when previously I was just focused on all the dark stuff, which remains dark, but there's some
absolutely.
There's even some social justice things that happen. It's pretty cool. So that's my little spiel on that.
Colin Kaepernick, who was kind of then blacklisted after kneeling, which is a complicated story that people beyond me know much more about. But yeah, he got totally mistreated by the NFL.
Yeah. And I meant there's social justice stuff in a positive way, but yeah, that's true. That's true. I've only ever really known the negative social justice stuff. It's really dark and awful. But then there's some little moments, there's something called the Rooney Rule, which is that it was started by the Steelers, that if they're hiring for a coach, they have to by law also interview Black coaches, and it cannot just be white interviewees. So it's kind of a nice, it's little, it's only a tiny little, and it might mean absolutely nothing because it doesn't mean they have to hire one, but at least it's a symbol of sort of the idea that they're aware of the fact there's some real need for social justice aspects. Also, Steelers has a Black coach, which is nice. I really like being able to see some of that because most of them are very white. Like, honestly, they kind of, they all kind of look the same to me, of the white ones. They all, the same kind of like vibe. So I like the NFL is a little bit more diverse than I've previously known the coaches to be. I guess I always think of like Bill Belichick anyway. So I have Pat's goggles on. Oh my God, we've talked about football way too long. I'm so sorry. Okay. Anyway, you can tell we've not talked to each other in a while too. It's so great to
we're
see
excited.
You. Yeah, we have things to say. So here's the more relevant stuff. First of all, for my check-in, I want to do a little bit of a recap of our first year of the podcast so that we can land on what our goals are for the next year. So on the site that hosts our podcast, they have been giving us our podcast year in review. We've had 75 episodes. Okay.
Woo!
75. That's so many. And
go us.
I know. I'm so proud of that. We've had plenty. We also have 5 cities that are the most popular for downloading. And number 4 is in Germany. That's Frankfurt am Main. I'm very excited about that. I think that's really cool. And I've noticed that there's at least one person. So to you, person of any gender, thank you so very much, because we are really appreciating your support. I noticed also that our Germany effect has been spreading a little bit. So thank you so much, friend. Really happy to have you in our listenership. And we have also been downloaded in 26 countries.
Woo!
Our number 1 country is US. Number 2, Germany. Number 3 is Russian Federation. Number 4 is India. And number 5 is Israel. So
very cool.
Thank you, 5 countries of our top 5 there that have been downloading. Really super appreciate you. And we're going to keep moving and shaking this year. So that is our recap of the first year. To say that it isn't super, ground swelling is understandable because podcasts take a little bit of time. And there's all this sort of idea about the only ones that really work are people that really try to stick it out, because the first year is always going to be sort of fumbling around in the dark. And we've definitely done some fumbling, and that's been great because we're learning from it. And the nice thing about this is we'll keep learning. Even, if we were doing this 10 years from now, we'd still be learning. So that's actually a really nice positive part of it. It's kind of exciting to try out different things. So there'll be things that we try out this year that will probably flop, but we're just going to see, we're going to try our hat at different things to see where our lane is most robust and most desired by our fans and our listeners. So we are here at our most exciting news that we've been talking about for weeks now that we wanted to share, which is that we are officially starting a Patreon, which is very exciting. Because it also, even though there is a way to become a subscriber and spend $5 a month or up to $20 a month, depending on how much content you want, there is also products to be had for free. So it's also exciting for anybody. This is not only for those with access or financial access. There are going to be things on there that allow us to reach out in ways that you can't just do auditorily through the podcast. So I hope that you all check it out, even if just to see, poke around a little bit. You can also get just a one-time purchase of a product if you want to do a specific video or such. We have video episodes of our podcast. That brings us to another point of our announcement, which is that we're officially going to share what we look like. We've been mostly hiding who we are. I would say kind of out of protection for our careers. But we've gotten to the point where we acknowledge that really reality TV shouldn't be a guilty pleasure. It is actually a really important vehicle for learning about mental health. And there are a lot of things that we can really add to the conversation about mental health that is important because there's so much misinformation that's out there, and reality TV does perpetuate some of that. So I think we're, ready to sort of dip our toe in the acknowledging that we watch reality TV in a way that means that our coworkers can find that out, and our students. So that is a part of what we're doing through the Patreon, is also being a little bit more transparent with you all about who we are. So you'll see a lot of really cool kind of things. I brought up the video episodes. We're also going to have our mental health checkups exclusively on Patreon. And we're also going to have things like videos explaining certain concepts. So right now you will find a video about Robert Jr.'s disclosure about mental health, and I do a deep dive in terms of what we can learn from that and from Mary's reaction to it. And then there's another one on the ultimatum, because the ultimatum in this last season had a lot of relational messages that were really important. So I sort of paired those with relational recommendations. So there's gonna be informative videos. Again, you can purchase those, but you can see the trailers for free on the Patreon. I say that's on there now, but you actually can't see it yet. But when you hear this, right? So if they're hearing this next Monday, it'll be a week from now. So
wow.
Yeah.
It'll be up.
And then we're going to also release a calendar with some eventsy things, because we're also going to do a live Q&A, which might have one person in it. And that's totally fine, because it's going to be a an inaugural event that eventually will repeat, maybe like 3 months later or something like that, sort of build up towards more of a bidirectional conversation. I really do think this is like, we're coming in low expectations. Like we recognize it's going to be like whoever's feeling like they want to, like be in contact with us for now is fabulous and wonderful. And there's no pressure whatsoever. And this might be a year from now that we actually even meet somebody who's listening to us. That's fine too. Whatever it is, we're just excited to be able to like really think about the legs that this could have for really actually making a difference in terms of how people digest mental health information and what therapy looks like, because the misinformation about what therapy looks like is wild.
And reality TV, as you said, perpetuates that in all sorts of ways. The ayahuasca bros are alive and well. They're healed from their fun, fabulous trip retreat. That's not therapy, folks.
No,
but anyway.
no. I mean, well, so right, like it's a type of therapy, but it's not like, it's not like our classical or like what you would be, it's not what you would be getting out of a formal therapy relationship. It's a different kind of, experience. And I would say also, Jesse did not do ayahuasca any favors in how he did not actually change at all.
No.
It was all tough.
Shep, TBD, but we'll see what's going on there. But exactly. Yeah, Jesse was a different level of, but I think let me specify my take. My take is the hedonistic, pleasure-seeking bro who does ayahuasca, which is like a drug as a way to symbolize change. I think they are maybe not looking at themselves to the degree that they could in a more long-term way that maybe folks of a certain white, upper class, privileged identity status might need to. But I know ayahuasca can be very, very healing for people and is an indigenous form of healing. So not to knock that, that for those two specific men in the way they used it.
Right. It's sort of like the appropriational use of it. And like there's a long history of it. It sounds like really, really intense. Like it's a real journey of using psychedelics to also like face your trauma. There's like a specific like trauma part of it, like a night that's like all of the trauma and crying and a lot of emotions. And that I really respect that as like an important part of being seen as part of healing in the indigenous cultures, because there are some theories that suggest we don't need to look back at our trauma to be able to heal from it, which I just personally don't fully agree with. Not that can't help, but I tend to be of the camp that we face our traumas to be able to move through them and address our emotions associated with it as a part of healing from it. So I really respect that part of the ayahuasca journey. And I also think in general, psychedelic assisted therapy is really like moving and shaking. And I totally believe in that. And I also agree with you that the way that they're sort of popularizing it in reality TV is not helping that. Like it's not helping the legitimacy of it in any way. Just bummer. No.
It is.
Look at that, coming out strong with a take, Aaaand.
Yes,
a hot take, exactly. So come hang out with us on Patreon. You'll see some ads for it on our social medias coming up soon. And also there's going to be like chat room type stuff too. So we'd love to be in conversation with you and community. Oh my gosh, you know what this reminds me of too is we were talking at the beginning about how this year has already started out a little bit scary, just given what we know politically is coming to the fore and what we know happened the last time this president was president. So like having a community with like-minded folks and talking about, like feminism and also sociopolitics, but also just reality TV, but having a like-minded group there on a Discord or on the chat room on Patreon is going to ideally even just selfishly be really healing. Like, I think that's really important to be in community around these topics. So it could be an important part of coping. For me.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. I need to put more lights on in this room. I'll be right back.
You were in the dark.
The dark has come over me.
Exactly.
There we go. It gets dark very early in New England this time of year, and sometimes it catches up to. I was literally trying to put on these. My partner's mom, I'm at my partner's mom's house has these little window candles. And I was like, maybe I can just use these, but I'm like, no, this is not going to sustain the podcast.
No, it's not right enough.
No.
Anyway. We were just talking also about how it's finally getting like staying lighter longer, which is really nice. So
thank goodness.
Eventually you'll have outdoor light helping.
Yes, that will be great. And that is so helpful for our mental health. I love winter solstice. And when it just gets a little lighter out, it's like, hope.
It's so true. It feels so different.
It's just gets a little dark. It gets a little weird for a month and a half or so, I gotta say. But
Can you imagine being like in Alaska or like Finland, I guess too, right?
no,
Where it's like night all year. Oh my gosh. I feel like it would be so tough.
I would have serious problems.
Yeah.
Like I don't think I would cope or survive very well. Did you see True Detective Night Country?
Oh my fucking God. Yes, I did.
Oh, it was so good. So good. But that really like opened me up to like, damn, Alaska really goes through it. Like,
Yeah.
holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's so, there's a like scary movie. I forget what it is, but it's like Josh Hartnett, like 28 Days Later or something. It was set in Alaska, and like the idea is that like during the like nighttime era of the year that's when like the vampires come out because they don't have to worry about light. And so it's like this idea that just that's what first opened me up to the idea of even having nighttime be your day round, 24-hour round the clock, and just this idea therefore that the first time I learned about that, for it to be associated with the idea that that's how like vampires come out, it's just not a good association probably, but yeah, definitely spooky.
Very spooky, but we're on the other side of that spooky. I mean, we are not in Alaska, to be clear, but yeah, but you know, we're feeling optimistic.
Yeah.
Even though 2025 might be a shitstorm. That's okay.
Exactly. That's going to be like the asterisk, you know, it's like caveat. There are other things that will not be great, but we can still find hope and be like, okay with it. Doesn't mean that we're like denying the fact there's also going to be hardship. Because we're going to whole object think about this year. There's going to be positives and negatives and challenges and strengths.
This is very true. I took my hat off, but then I like my hair, once I turned the lights on, looked a little rough. So now I put my hat back on. We're good. Really on a journey right now.
We're just figuring it out. We're figuring out what we got here. We're seeing what we're doing.
Yes.
We're figuring it out again. Got to get back used to it, man. It's like really, we took a couple weeks. It felt like it had been like a month because we've been doing it weekly for so long. So
right. It was like I felt a little like lost in space. Like I think this podcast helps keep me grounded or tethered to something. I felt a little out to space. So it was, I'm glad to be back.
I love that. Even though it's like kind of sad for you, I like love it. I'm like, I love that we're tethering you. That makes me feel good.
Yeah.
You know, it's a positive use of our podcasting time. And it's true. It doesn't have to take a whole lot of time for us. Like it's a couple hours of recording on Fridays or whatever, for it to actually have like a really good effect on the schedule, sort of like structure for us and sort of having a way to touch base. Because we also socialize too. We use the time to sort of check in with each other first. And that's really nice. It's a nice
we do.
Like tea date.
Exactly. Or wine date, depending on how I'm feeling for the week. As
right. Or what time
right now I've got a little shard going on. Actually, I think this is a Pinot. I can't remember, but
Fair.
Got something going on. Something of my partner's parents' stash, which is always the best kind of stash.
I was going to say it might be high quality, therefore. Very nice.
Pinkies up.
I love it. I love it. Okay, good. Well, so with those, contextual factors in mind, shall we enter into what we're doing today, which is,
yes,
friends, you love, but I was going to say, we love our award show, which is, we used to call it the award smorgasbord earlier in the year. And now we call it the award show, which is where we dole out 8 awards to any reality TV moments or castmates from the previous week. In this case, we're doing annual, baby. We're going for the whole year. What are we giving our best awards to? So you'll notice there's not a whole lot of context given because we're referring to things that we've talked about. So, if you find yourself wondering more about it, you'll be able to go back and look for that episode because we've dove into these. I think dove as well.
Dove, yeah.
We've dove into these for sure. Okay, so I wanted to also just give us a quick little shout out on the number of shows we've covered, because we've got Bachelor with Joey's season, Bachelorette with Jen's season, Golden Bachelorette with Joan's season, Traitors 1 and 2, Summer House, all the seasons that Dr. Ray caught up on, but then also the newest season, Southern Charm, Vanderpump Rules, their final season, Love is Blind UK and season 7 for the US, Love Island US, The Valley, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, Beverly Hills, and New York City. We also covered Bridgerton and Perfect Match. And I know that's not it, but those are the ones that we formally addressed together. And then additionally, in some of the awards episodes, we covered things like Survivor, The Challenge, Big Brother, The GOAT, Real Housewives of Potomac in New Jersey, The Mole, Greed or The Trust. I couldn't remember what that one was called, but I watched that one. It was fine. It was good. The Ultimatum, The Anonymous, Summer House, Martha's Vineyard, and Too Hot to Handle. So those were just my first, I know these are some of them, but I'm imagining there are more. So we really did some justice to the social media, some justice to the reality TV world this year.
We did. I
Love
should
it.
also add, we did Game of Thrones, and I
House of
just
the
watched seasons
Dragon.
1 and 2 over break of Winter
Oh.
House,
Oh
which
my
was
God,
a journey.
fun.
Have you
Okay,
seen Winter House?
I saw one of the first 2 seasons and I never moseyed on back. So I could be one to do that again.
I might cover that in our traditional awards show component of this episode, because I have thoughts, my friends. I have some real thoughts.
Okay, excellent. Which brings us to what these awards are, because we have some that are like, basically we have the like cumulative version of the awards, so like it's like basically one of our awards, for example, is testosterone, where it's for like the most patriarchal moment from the past week. We have the most testosterone from the year, so we have like the yearly testosterone, but then we also have some awards that are just brand new that are specific to just this time of year. So what do we think? Shall we hop, right, jump, skip, hop, skip, jump, rip on in this?
I think that we should. Yes, let's go for it.
I love it, because I'm going to undo what I just said about what we have for awards, because the other type of award we have too, which we'll start with, is basically like our segments, but in award form. So for example, our first one is going to be, what was the best sociopolitical learning opportunity from this year?
So I put Sierra and Maya from, I think, Summer House season 6, talking about the racial dynamics that they were experiencing living in the Hamptons. I thought that was actually a very productive conversation. There was definitely some white fragility in there, mostly from Paige, interestingly enough. A lot of white tears, but I think, I think it was handled in a way where, because it's not just a social media conversation, but these people are living in a house together and have to learn to live with each other. They then had this rupture and were able to actually repair. And I saw Andrea in particular, who was one of the big kind of aggressors of the racism being perpetuated, like not knowingly, obviously, it was subconscious on his part, but he really changed the way he interacted with Sierra and Maya moving forward in a way that I found really cool. And I think the cast in general was much more mindful of how they felt, and also how like the Latinx and Hispanic cast members might feel being on the Hamptons in a summer house. So I thought it was really cool. I thought it was really lovely to watch, and I loved it. So that is my best sociopolitical learning opportunity.
I love that so much, because I have a parallel to you in that my honorable mention was for Bryn and Uba, their most recent argument, bringing light to colorism regardless of race. So I totally agree. The colorism learning is so key. Oh, you have to see it. But
I can't wait.
So, and that was recently discussed. You can easily find that in a recent episode. But this idea of like bringing attention to colorism, even in the context of somebody being half black, half white, or multiracial, still being still falling victim to being colorist or having colorist views, is really, really key. I think that was important learning. And then I also had an honorable mention for the white fragility lessons that came out of Big Brother this year. I thought that was really cool. But I gave this to Martha's Vineyard Summer House, as I had referenced at the time, that they like spent some time to actually like just literally educate us in like kind of a pop way about HBCUs. So historically black colleges and universities. So I thought that was really cool. I learned some things I didn't know, actually, even though I know a little bit about HBCUs. And I thought that made it like very much a direct choice to educate us. And I thought it was a nice thing they did. So, yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Nice.
So I'm so curious. I think you made many great predictions this year. I want to hear what the prediction that you are most proud of is. That's our second annual award.
Fabulous. Connected to the sort of like, we've mentioned this before category. I mentioned, I would say that basically my tripart. I know we both talked about the idea that Jen would propose really early on. We both mentioned that before I heard it anywhere else. So that was definitely came out to be true. But I think the ones I'm most proud of are calling sort of like out Sam M or Sam Mean's behavior and Chalk's controlling behavior really early on. And they just tracked the whole season. Like both of them just like didn't let up on how much that was definitely problematic. And I thought of it like really Sam M was like during the bio, and then with Chalk it was pretty early on. So just in the way they use their language, it's interesting how that can really cue you into some things that are problematic. And adjacent to that was saying that Devin knew how to play the game. Like we were talking about, I said that like 5 or 6 times, but I had no idea it would be that bad. So that was not quite, that was an honorable mention as well. But I would say Sam M.
That was
Chalk.
tough.
Yeah. But I really like yours as well. I was telling you what I think your best prediction was because I would loved it. It was so cool the way that worked out that day. So tell us what your prediction that you're most proud of is.
This shows Kate's feminist, amazing way of being, because I was like, Kate, I can't remember any predictions I made this year. Help. And she reminded me, and it was very helpful. So she reminded me that I predicted that Pascal might be kind of the sort of guy, because he seems very image focused, maybe as a result of the trauma that he's experienced, likes to date younger women. And that played out where apparently he said that he would need the age lower limit on if he were to be the Bachelor to be like 10 years younger or something like that. Yeah. So he definitely wanted younger women. And I think some of the subtler things he said where he was like, I just don't feel the spark. I think it was just like, how could you not with a woman like Joan? She's incredible in so many ways. And I think it was probably based in he is used to dating younger women, and that's sort of his bread and butter. So thank you, Kate, for reminding me.
Yeah, I loved that when that happened because you came in. I had already written in my notes that I was going to share about how Pascal had said that on an interview about how he would need the age limit lowered. And you just out of nowhere had this musing where you're like, I feel like maybe he's one of those people who and I was like, wait till you hear this. You were so right, but I'm not going to tell you till we get there. It was so cool. It's that is so Kismet. Right. Darn attuned. I love it.
It's
fabulous.
Great when we can attune. And man, did you catch on to Sam M and Chalk. Sam M, I did not see it coming. You were so attuned to his brand of narcissism in a way that was so impressive. And it really played out. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah. It's one of those times you don't want to be that, right? It was dark. It was really not good. And same thing with Devin. I wanted to have the best hope for him. But so I did actually try to hold some hope too. He was in our final threes and stuff, but we still knew he was just there's something very calculated about how he was behaving on the show. He knew the right thing to say, so it's such a bummer.
Did.
Yeah. And also this
sad.
Is worth noting, we're watching how it's bottled up for us. So this is not to say that anyone else should be noticing those things. Definitely Jen would not have known, she's in person with it and seeing something else. So this is not at all like that, but just from our view, there's certain things we can pick up on that are different, having a little bit of distance, and then also having our own experience, having worked with people with narcissism, right, in therapy and so forth. Right. So different set of knowledge there. How about the best representation of therapy? Did you think there was a good version of it and how it was shown on the TV shows this year?
This is kind of a multi-season arc, and we've been talking about this recently, so maybe I'm having some recency bias. But Erica, I think, has shown a lot of growth, and I'm so proud of her. And we've seen her in actual capital T therapy, and she has made a lot of change, and I'm so proud of her. That sounds paternalistic. I'm happy for her. I guess I'm proud of her, whatever. Yeah. I don't know.
And impressed by her too.
Yes.
I'm really impressed with her dedication to it and vulnerability in it, and in the way that she talks about herself now. I think also that was a really tough scene to let be public, that she didn't understand empathy. That's actually quite a big deal, And so I think her vulnerability in having that conversation with her therapist was really key in really breaking some barriers down and how we think about things like therapy and empathy. I think I would say I totally agree. I had this exact same representation. I would add that her therapist makes a lot of interpretations. And so she speaks kind of for Erica a lot. She'll sort of be well, this is why this is a thing. And this is, which is not to say that we don't all make interpretations. Certainly we do. But I think a lot of therapists also work hard to let the client reach that connection because it actually helps it stick more. They're going to remember it better if they arrived at that, oh, this is this thing that I do. So I'm not saying it's flawless, but it is definitely the best representation I've seen on reality TV of therapy. I have a little additional data point here. Did you see the latest episode of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills?
I haven't, no.
Okay, fabulous. In it, they said they're talking about, actually it's a whole other scene of therapy, which is really great.
Oh,
and
wow.
At one point, Erica calls out Sutton for having a personality disorder, but also says, and she's like, but I have one, so whatever. And then you starts drinking her drink. It was so cute. Such a funny, I liked the way that she did that, honestly, even though accusing someone of having personality disorder is actually a huge deal and something I would not personally endorse in any way, shape, or form. But the way that she normalized her having one and feeling okay with it was really big. So then my, wheels were turning what, I wonder what she might have been told she has. I personally don't agree with diagnosing personality disorders as much as they get diagnosed. So I was just curious what she had been told. So then when she was talking to her therapist said, like, don't worry, I'll be on call for you that night. And then Erica said, you know your client. So then I was thinking that probably means that she's doing DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, and that therefore she's been told she has a borderline personality disorder. Obviously, I could be wrong, so don't take this to the presses, but this could be what that is, because DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, one of the aspects of it is having phone calls in between sessions and being available to your client that way. And if somebody had, like, for example, narcissism or even dependency disorder, you would not do that. You would not want to be on call for them.
Right.
It'd be dangerous in some ways too, really, frankly. So it means to me pretty much, like, I feel firm, but, like, obviously I could definitely be wrong, that that's probably what she's been told, which gives me an opportunity to say that I feel critically about the diagnosis borderline personality disorder, because there's a lot of reasons. It could actually be more likely complex trauma, because it came up at a time when women were not diagnosed with trauma, because only men in combat were. And so how do we explain all these women with all these symptoms that look like, like wild social dynamics and maybe manipulative to try to get their needs met, which even just using the word manipulative is actually kind of, pejorative, when it's also like trying to get their needs met. Like, that's a thing that women had to do, and that we all have to do, actually. And so I have a lot of actually issues with that, because especially it is seen so negatively. When having complex trauma, if we to put it in that frame, it's a lot more understandable, and it's not a product of a person individually. So I think personally, even if there is a separate thing that's not complex trauma, that is BPD, I still think having it in the frame of seeing it as trauma is still a much better way of addressing it with people and sort of seeing it as a person with it. So, like, if I were a person with that diagnosis, I would rather think of it as complex trauma personally. So I think it's a nicer way of understanding it. And it doesn't matter, because no matter what, those symptoms are the same. So, like, even if it is BPD, if we're seeing it as complex trauma, we're still treating the same symptoms. And so I don't want to take that away from anybody who feels closely attached to their BPD diagnosis, because to each their own, of course. And I just, as myself as a therapist, don't agree mostly with diagnosis in general, but certainly personality disorders feels very victim blaming to me. It's like we're saying, like, something's wrong with you as a person. Like, it's not just like a symptom you have, like, you have a personality thing. And that's sad, especially when often, and especially with Erica, we know for sure that a lot of it is trauma. It just feels
absolutely
victim blaming. So.
And it's been used, I think, in a way to distance. I observe when a client gets that diagnosis, therapists distance themselves and say, well, that's their stuff.
Yeah.
And don't engage with them as seriously. And it's very othering. Yeah. And I think complex trauma invites a lot more empathy. So like you said, it doesn't really matter what the diagnosis is, but I think one of them leads to a better therapeutic relationship, where the other, I think, can be very othering and kind of perpetuate maybe people with complex trauma, or whatever you want to call it, feeling that they can't trust people.
Right. Right. It, like, reifies and reinforces the thing you're trying to treat with that person. And it reminds me also of this idea of, like, if someone's looking for attention, why is our reaction to not give it? Like, and that's sort of the idea with, like, kids too. It's like, oh, they're just looking for attention. It's like, well, they're looking for attention because they're not getting their needs met. So shouldn't that cue us into, like, we should give them attention? And so the same thing happens with folks with BPD, where it's like the therapist or somebody might be like, oh, they're just manipulative for attention. It's like, well, so maybe they're not getting the attention they need right now. And so that actually could be a really healing and important thing. And maybe it is helping them assess what their need for like, for example, validation is, so that they can also have a more self-contained or self-compassionate view that might not require as much validation from other people. But it's not the same thing as saying they're manipulative and whatever. So I just, there's a lot of, like, stigma, unfortunate stigma there. And so seeing that Erica said that, and then being pretty sure that that's probably what she's been told she has, I did feel a little bit differently towards her therapist. Honestly, I just was sort of like, I hope that she's talking about it in a way that is not, I think she is probably talking about it in a way that's less stigmatizing, because Erica was like, I have one, and she was sort of, which gives me
no big
hope.
deal.
Yeah, exactly. But I hope Erica also knows, like, so much of that could just easily be tied to trauma and have really nothing to do with how her brain naturally was.
Right. So. It's a bit unfair. Ugh.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be excited to watch this most recent episode.
Yeah, it was good. So, cool. Representation of therapy, that's what that is there.
Yes. So yours was Erica as well, or?
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
So what was the most problematic or misleading representation of therapy that you've seen?
I think we might be aligned on this one, but the Jesse and Michelle of it all with the coaching therapist, like, yeah, because that was tough because they had a coach. They kind of referred to it as a therapist. That's not what a therapist is. He didn't do what therapists do. So that was a bummer to watch. I will also say, though, honorable mention at minimum was Jax, because he told us about, first of all, he was like, I've been to therapy. It didn't work for me. And he talked about how he had a therapist who went out to bars and was talking about how he was their client. That is wildly unethical. If that's true, that is way fucked up and also way uncommon. Like, that really is not something that, like, that's going against our views and ethics. Like, I've never in my life come close to doing something, I would never dream of it.
No.
So I think that's not just us either. That's more the norm. So it's a bummer that that person betraying his confidentiality really like ruined, like spoiled the pot for him, if you will. But it also therefore spoils the pot for a lot of other people who are hearing it. And that's really unfortunate because then they're worried that might happen for them if they have a little bit of fame, perhaps that might make them think that would happen. It's just so uncommon. And I hate that it ruined it for him, therefore ruined it for other people hearing about it. And then also for Brittany, frankly, she was really the one suffering by him not going to therapy. And then that was the other piece, was him saying to her that he would go to therapy and then making the appointment, but not going because it was too far or whatever. So the whole scenario around him in therapy was also, I think, problematic and misleading.
Absolutely. Yes, love that one. And I love both of those. And yes, please listen to our episodes about them because we really go in on Jesse and Michelle's therapy and Jax.
Right. And it's not like the coach wasn't nice and great, but just not a therapist, and it's important to know the distinction there for the viewer in particular. So, and this is The Valley, by the way, for anyone who didn't see The Valley.
Yes. So I already said this at the top of the show. Mine is similar to yours. It's the Jesse and Shep with their ayahuasca healing journeys. Mm-hmm. I find them frustrating, not because ayahuasca is not healing. And like you said, like a lot of hallucinogenics are being used really effectively in therapy right now. Mm-hmm. I just think that the way they are doing it leaves me wanting. And I don't think they have done true reflection on the harm they have caused to other people. Yes. And that bums me out.
Mm-hmm. Totally get that. Yeah. By the way, Harry Jowsey was being interviewed on some podcast, and he was talking about how he did an ayahuasca journey too, by the way. Not shocking. Kind of a similar bucket of men. Harry Jowsey. And he talked about like this healing that he had in his relationships with his brother and his dad, for having real empathy for them in the way that one of his hallucinatory sort of like hallucinations, in the way that it happened, it helped him sort of reconnect with them. And so there was a little bit of an element of sort of like, some empathy building around it for him. So I think it's not to say that that can't happen, but we didn't see that at all with how Jesse was when he got back, nor like, have we seen anything that we would tie that to for Shep. So.
And perhaps what's going on with those men is pervasive in the way that could be a part of it, but there needs to be ongoing processing and accountability to keep them from sliding back into old patterns that are very hedonistic and fun as white men living in a society that validates their worst impulses.
Fair. I like it.
Yes.
Okay. How about the most problematic or misleading representation of mental health? So not therapy, but mental health.
So yeah, Jax, just in general, saying that he's like, I think trying to put forth on the Valley this idea that he's changed. He was really attached to his image and the way he looked. And I think he wanted to show himself as having gone through some growth. And I think it was, maybe he had gone through a little bit of growth. I don't know, but I don't think that's what I saw in that season of The Valley. I think he's a good reality TV star. Do not get me wrong on that. But I think he is very mean to Brittany and very immature. And I think he is getting help now, and I hope it's good help.
Me too. Yeah, that's really tough. Really tough. There's some things he says in the news where I'm like, doesn't seem like it's growing at all. So that sucks. I had the same exact dynamic, but with Harry Jowsey, because he did the same thing on Perfect Match, where he was like, I've been to therapy, so now I'm all better. And then like immediately behaved in the opposite direction. So problematic. And then the other one was a honorable mention to Dominique and Chris, where Chris, this is also from Perfect Match, where Chris had these like bisexuality myths, that were coming out. Very upsetting, deeply disturbing. So like, for example, he said that he was like, he basically used the fact that she needed him to give her the like rose, if you will, and used that to be like, well, like, because you're bi, like we could look at like threesomes or whatever, essentially. And he didn't say it quite like that, but that was the idea. And that was really disturbing.
It was bad. That was very upsetting. Disgusting even. I remember we talked about that at the time very passionately. It was so biphobic. And Dominique, I think, did a great job trying to stand up for herself in an environment that was not trying to understand her experience.
No. And it was so clear she felt misunderstood by producers too. Like it really didn't feel supported. And it was very unfortunate to watch. Yeah.
Okay, so that one. So what was the most healing for us to see representation of mental health?
So there were a few things that happened around the same time, and the other two are going to come up. So even though I'm giving this one to Aaaand from Real Housewives of New York City, it isn't to me the most healing, but I think this is the best representation of that one so that I can use the other two in a different area. But the representation she had of mental health around the idea of starting to acknowledge and embrace the fact she'd had an abortion as something that was worth talking about in a public way, as something that then becomes very validating for so many women at a time where it's really important for there to be some solidarity around abortion, that was really healing to see as like, for us, even those of us without having had an abortion, right? Just this idea of like seeing that that's something that can be talked about in a more public way. And at a time when it's not being talked about as like a good thing, sadly. And then also the fact that she was able to tell her dad about it before he died. Like something about that, for those of us who have lost a parent, has like something sort of healing about it. This element of like, she got to be able to get in there and say it before he passed away was really beautiful to see.
It was cool. Aaron's imperfect, and that aspect of what she has done was huge, I think, for this season.
That. Yes, perfectly put. How about you?
I brought up Kristen Doty. Again, another imperfect human who I think has made a shit ton of progress. And I think that showed, like, talk about Jax, who's like out here, like singing from the rooftops how much he's changed, versus Kristen, who I actually think has and is trying her best imperfectly, because I think we all are imperfect, especially in stressful situations where alcohol is involved and people are making us feel unsafe. And that is not her fault. The way Jesse treated her was not her fault.
No.
She, I think, has shown a lot of growth, was a good friend to a lot of people, and tried really hard to have good boundaries on the show. And I was so proud of her. Again, impressed by her. I like that better.
Right?
That's very
go-to.
Yeah, I love it. I was impressed by the way she moved through these very complicated dynamics on this show. So go, Kristen. I look forward to seeing where you go next. And I saw she's pregnant, and I'm so happy for her.
Congrats to her.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, I was really impressed by her growth as well. She had many moments where I was like, good for her. And I think part of what was hard about the Valley, and you're saying this sort of lack of safety, was also people's inability to see her as changed when she was trying to make so much change, and sort of that being stuck in how people saw her from the VPR days was part of what I thought was beautiful, that she brought that up even on The GOAT. She brought up like how are, like people are still seeing me as like okay to bash on because of how I was bashed on at VPR. And so, yeah, I'm glad that it seems like she's in therapy, or at least talking to somebody who's helping her think through the way that has had an effect on her life today as well. Love that.
Yay.
What about most vulnerable mental health related moment? So like, what was the most vulnerable you saw a castmate be?
I think Charles from Golden Bachelorette, when he was talking about complex trauma, really, with blaming himself for his wife's death, and having a moment with, what's his face? I forget his name. Guy, the doctor who was, turns out he was kind of a stalker. And I think he was great in that moment of like reassuring Charles that his wife's death was not his fault. That was a really beautiful moment. And I was really happy for Charles that he got that sort of clarity. So yeah, I appreciated that moment.
That's great. I agree. He really was quite vulnerable. And this is where I would give mine to Brynn for talking about the sexual assault. And I think that was extremely vulnerable. And again, one of those things where it's like so important for us to be seeing and talking about, but just like the extremely high rates of sexual harassment, sexual violence for women. It just is so key. And the way she talked about it, and the way it is a complicated thing, the way she let it be complicated, not just like, cut and dry. So yeah, I would give that to her.
Oh, great one. Great pick. Okay, so I want to hear who had the most or least growth within a relationship this year for you.
Fabulous. Yeah, I would give it to PK and Dorit just because I was already on alert, sort of like spidey senses about how their relationship had been back when he did that like horrifically misattuned birthday thing where he like abducted her after she had been held at gunpoint in her own home. Just like the wild of that was out of control. And she tried to explain it calmly to him and he really wasn't hearing it. And then he was pretty nasty. He was like, well, I guess I'm just done surprising you then. It's like, maybe you should be like, given how this went, like, and then the way you're using that as like well, then I'm not going to do this for you. And it's just so misattuned and really depressing and a little bit narcissistic. So I think that for me cued in like, oh, this is like a real problem. Like these two are having a tough time. So yeah, sure enough, I wouldn't even call this growth because not on Dorit's part, but PK's part. I guess on Dorit's part because she's in a denial phase that just necessitates that it's not like forward. It's not forward progress because denial is a phase of grief. So it's moving towards movement. But in the moment, it's more of the more stagnant phases of movement and growth and progress. And then I would say that PK has not moved at all because he's blaming her like a lot, even in the preview for next episode. I was like, oh my God.
Oh,
like,
God.
I know. So, meh. How about you?
Okay, so mine's a both. So mine is Kyle and Amanda for both most and least growth. And I think that this works only because I think couples will have periods of growth and have periods where they fall back into old patterns. Absolutely. We see that with Kyle and Amanda. Because I watched the entire catalog of Summer House, I got to see periods like after their wedding, they were doing really well. And like we're really in sync with each other and really supportive. This most recent season, they're kind of struggling again. I think they do love each other. I think that you mentioned that before, and I think it's true. And I think they do come back to each other. And to be fair, and I think Paige started to see this with Craig, with how people kind of insulted their relationship. It's probably hard to have people coming after your relationship on a television show. I think they have shown growth over time. I think Kyle knows that Amanda's kind of insights to his behavior are right, even if he doesn't want to hear them at the time. I think Kyle, because he's so high energy, does excite and sometimes motivate Amanda, sometimes in problematic ways. Like I think they see each other and appreciate each other. And I think sometimes they annoy the shit out of each other. Depending on where they're at, we see different sides of that. I think overall their trajectory is on the up and up with some peaks and valleys. But yeah, I continue to enjoy watching them on screen. I think because I watched so much Summer House this year, I feel very close to them and I am rooting for them. I think Kyle can be very sexist and childish. And I hope he works on that. I do love when he's drunk and snacking at like 3 a.m. That's my favorite Kyle. And he just says the weirdest shit. Like that version of Kyle, the best, goofy, hilarious.
Especially like by himself. I love it when he's by himself in the kitchen.
It's so good. He must know that it's good TV at this point, and that's fine. I don't mind. It's hilarious. The version of him that's sexist and paternalistic in putting women down, I wish would just stop. But yeah, I hope that they will keep kind of trending in a direction that brings them towards each other as opposed to away from each other.
I totally agree. And if you can learn that it's good TV to have him snacking and ranting at night, then hopefully you can also learn it's good human behavior to treat your wife with more equity to how you want to be treated.
Absolutely. And her friends.
Yes. Blanket. Just all people, actually. Gender or other. It doesn't matter what the lines are. I love that. That was a great one. How about most important that they get to trauma therapy? So like, this isn't to say like, we're like, referring them to trauma therapy, but just that like, we think that trauma therapy could be helpful for XYZ. And also you could, instead of thinking of that as a person, you could also think of it as like a moment that would be really helpful to process in therapy, trauma therapy.
So I was thinking about this because there's a lot of people who I think should be in trauma therapy. Who I landed on was Heather. And the reason I landed on Heather is I don't think she's had therapy. Is that right?
Yeah,
I think she really needs it because I think she's kind of projecting, or she has a tendency to project her experience onto other people's experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the good thing about that is sometimes it can give her a lot of empathy for people,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also like clear that sometimes it doesn't, or it's like her unprocessed stuff coming out, or she misses the mark, and I just think, I'm like, man, she would really benefit from a therapist, because I think the great parts of her personality are the parts that uplift people,
Yep.
bring people together. I think she can do that really well. But I think because she has these parts of herself that are invalidated, it
Mm-hmm.
comes out in different interactions. So I think she would really benefit from long-term therapy.
I love that. Yeah. Especially because it reminds me of like when she wrote the book about herself, like what we heard about Brynn writing the book, where she was like, this is good therapy. Like, I think Brynn deeply, this isn't who I chose, so I will say it too, that Brynn deeply needs really good trauma therapy as well for the sexual assault. And the fact that she referred to writing the book as itself therapy means she's not in therapy, probably. And I think it's probably a similar thing happened with Heather, where it felt therapeutic or cathartic to write the book, but that's not the same thing as really seeing a therapist. And I highly recommend. You can keep shopping around till you find somebody that you jive with. It doesn't have to be one and done. Sort of find somebody, and if you don't like them, don't give up hope, I think I would say.
Absolutely.
So
what is your pick? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, not at all. You're right on the money what I was going to say there, which is, even though Brynn, I think, is deeply in need of it, I did pick Raquel, because Raquel's from also Real Housewives of New York City, because it seemed pretty underprocessed. And again, as I said on that day on the podcast, like, it could be underprocessed in the form that, like, this is her first time disclosing to a national audience. So of course that's going to be new for anybody with any trauma. But I think given that it was so activating, regardless of whether that's all it was that made it so activating, it still means it would be good to, that was probably re-traumatizing, the way that she had to retell that and the way that she was reacting. So I definitely think she'd benefit. Yeah. We all would, by the way. We all have fucking trauma of some sort, little T, big T. I tend to think we all could benefit from trauma therapy for sure.
Absolutely. Life on this planet is traumatizing.
Yeah, COVID, right? Community trauma.
Yeah. Oh my God. So much. Ooh, this one's fun. I'm so glad you put this one. Who do you think is the most misunderstood castmate?
Yay. I'm glad you like that. Yeah, I put Brynn. I think she's way misunderstood. There's a lot of trauma. She does problematic things. I think the colorism was pretty ghastly. But I think in a lot of ways people really do misunderstand her, and that she has a lot of trauma that makes it understandable for me about the way she moves. And so I feel kind of badly. I think a lot of what she's viewed through is the lens of sexism, like that people see her as, like those leaky pigeon thing or whatever, or that she's always on. Like, that's not, like, she's taught to be on to survive. So like damning her for that feels really icky and victim blaming. So I don't like how the nature of her misunderstoodness is also victim blaming. I don't like it. But yeah. How about you?
Mine is controversial, and I'm excited about it. I love yours. Because Brynn has been getting, at least I didn't see the most recent episode, but she has not been getting a good edit this season. Mine is maybe more of a bad edit. I'm picking Sheena. I know, that's cringe.
No, I like it.
That's
I like
cringe.
it. I'm on board.
Here is why I think this. I think that she is a people pleaser for sure.
Yes.
And I think that is rooted in sexism, that is rooted in all sorts of things. I think that historically on VPR, Kristen, Stassi especially, and Katie have been really mean to her and treated her very, very poorly. Yes. And she has mostly just tried to like make peace. Mm-hmm. And I think that is exhausting. I hate this whole pick me thing that's come up around, like, she's become the poster child for the pick me movement, which I hate. I think it's very sexist because it essentially says that women who are like maybe go-getters or like nice just, like, or whatever
want to be liked because we all want to be liked. Like, it's a human thing. Right. It's so wild to like punish people for wanting to be chosen or to be appreciated. Like, what the fuck? We actually like have an actual biological need to be chosen and seen and recognized. Yeah.
And I think she gets a lot of shit. And I think she kind of played with that, where there was something where she was like, let me see if I can make this about me. But people took it literally, where I think she was being tongue in cheek. Mm-hmm. And I just think, I think she's very imperfect. Do not get me wrong. I do not think that Sheena is like this. But I think that she gets so much shit. And I just feel like she's not an easy target, because I think she's a strong woman. But like, it just feels unfair to me, because maybe she's internalized gender roles or the need to appease or something. And that's weaponized against her in a way that I find unfair.
Yes, massively. Very well put. And like, meanwhile, Schwartz is a people pleaser. You know, it's like
Right.
other people, this is like a very common thing. And especially for people, honestly, in reality TV, because that's part of what they're doing is looking for validation in the same kind of like people pleasing way that can feel fulfilling that somebody is pleased with you. You know,
Right.
it's a key thing of life again, as well. Validation. It's so sad.
Yes.
We damn so many important things, you know, and I think a lot of it comes down to this idea of like individualism, and like that our country and a lot of therapies as well are focused on like, once you're born, how do you become an individual and like separate from your family? Whereas like relational cultural theory and more relational theories are talking about like, how do you be in relationships? Not like how do you divide yourself, but how do you come together with people for the rest of your life? Because we all have dependency needs. We all have the need to be welcomed and loved and chosen. And so rather than seeing that as a negative thing, which you would see that as negative if you're thinking about the individualism, that there's a way to embrace it instead. And I think that that's the really important piece for us and our podcast. And I think it's also something that we find time and time again in research, where people are finding that relationships are the thing that make life worth living and that bring happiness. So let's focus on that instead of individuating.
We need each other, believe it or not.
Yes.
Sorry about it.
Sorry about it. We need community. Yeah.
But, this one's great too. I love this. So who is the castmate who knows the assignment?
Fabulous.
So they know what has been requested of them in the role they are given.
I love it. I love it. I'm giving this one to Bronwyn. I think she has nailed it and like sailed into the sunset with like how well she has nailed her new position on Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. She is taking up space. She is given a lot of space airtime because she's doing so well at it. Her husband is actively telling her, stop being dramatic, like stop getting involved. And she's not listening because she shouldn't be, because she's doing her job. And so like the fact he keeps saying that is like driving me a little bit wild. But I will say that she listens a lot to him too. And she feels very much like indebted to him, and like she needs to like please him. Speaking of people pleasing, like she needs to please him. So the fact she's not about this issue is saying a lot about how she knows, this is the assignment and she gets it. She knows the assignment and she's rocking it. So
I love that.
Pro Bronwyn. Yeah. How about you?
Mine is unsurprising. Phaedra knew the assignment on Traitors. She made that show in so many ways. She was so funny, so charismatic, and so good. And I just think that she has such a fun personality and is such an interesting, smart person. I love watching her on screen. And I think she nailed that show. And when she was chosen to be a traitor, she understood that assignment and she did it very well for most of the season, I will say.
Yeah. And she kind of came into it too. I think she was a little unsure at first, and then she sort of like began to trust herself. And I thought she was phenomenal. I totally agree. She's a major, major winner for me for this year. And actually is one of my winners for the next one. So we can go right into that one too. But I will just say Phaedra is a rock star of a human. I'm really on board with her too. It's these sound bites. I mean, the sound bites, to your point, definitely knows what she's doing, because she knows that those sound bites are so key. Like she can say something in just 3 seconds, which then can be shared. It's like memeable, if you will. So, she definitely understands the assignment. And actually, I would give like an honorable mention to Johnny Bananas, because he's somebody who talks even just like openly about the fact that part of why he thinks he's had such a good course or run on the challenge is because he does put his producer hat on in terms of like what would make this scene more interesting, because he wants the show to do well, because he does well if the show does well, sort of like comes within that attitude. He talked about it publicly. And I think that that's something that people are starting to grasp within the reality TV world, is sort of like, how do we help the show do well? Which means, maybe picking a fight about something we normally wouldn't fight about. But if it's going to sort of get this, if it's going to get Dorit to call Camille a C word, then let's do it. Let's get in there.
Let's go.
Let's go. So, this last award is, what is the most exciting gaming moment? Or you could say like a castmate play style. And so, I watched the Survivor, Big Brother, The Challenge, The Anonymous, a bunch more. But I think for you, at the very least, Traitors really hits that note. And so I'd be interested to see who you thought it might be.
I give it to Phaedra again, because I think she was so good. And what's his face from Big Brother? What was his name? Dan. Totally underestimated her. And I think the way that she read him and read the way she needed to be with him so correctly, like appeasing to him, letting him make all the moves so that she could like stand back. And he was obviously found out as a traitor very early. She was not, was incredible. I think at the end she was a little worn down, and you could see that in her last round table. But I think overall, Phaedra on the Traitors, incredible.
So, like, absolutely sold it. She is also mine. I gave her, and as well as Siri. Siri, oh my gosh, talks about Apple iPhone for you, Bear, but Suri, who was a Survivor player who also came on Traitors and won Traitors. She also really nailed it that season. So Suri and Phaedra are my top Traitors for sure. And then I would also say like Rachel in Survivor. Sorry. Okay. I would also say that Rachel in Survivor this year was just absolutely incredible. This was like a real good Survivor season. I definitely recommend that you watch this, Dr. Ray, because you have seen previous seasons and you know, like it was a return to old form. It was such a good season. Like it was like really why we watched Survivor. Yeah, it was so good. And I would say similarly, Johnny Bananas had a return to form on the challenge season 40, where they had the top 40 players who ever played it to come back. He did same thing. He was sort of back in old form. Yeah, he was incredible as well on that. So I think there were some real good gamers this season on these seasons from this past year. So that's exciting because I think that's also one of the shifts we're seeing is as we move towards combining like the love shows with the gaming shows, like how did the strategies change? And I think Phaedra was a real symbol of what that can look like because she kept the relationships key. So did Suri. Kept the relationships key, but also was still gaming and a little bit cutthroat. So we were talking about doing the awards that we also just do normally. So I'm gonna posit a suggestion here or pose a suggestion that we do when we do our normal awards episode in 2 episodes, let's say, that we include the ones that are like for the year. And so you can do either one. You could do an award from the past 2 weeks, or you could choose one that's like the annual one for each award as we go through.
I love it.
I'm excited. And by the way,
Yay.
To those listening, another piece of good news is that we're going to be covering The Traitors. Season 3 comes out on January 9th, which means probably our next episode you'll hear from us shall be that, most likely, and I hope so. We'll see if it's actually not the right timing because I haven't actually looked through that on the calendar there, but if not, we'll come back
excited.
to it. So before we close out, I want to ask you the overall, this is on the spot, so you did not have time to prepare this, but who would you say gets the housewife of the year for you this year?
Oh my gosh, that is a hard one. Wow. Huh. Ooh. I'm trying to think back on all the housewives. I think I'm going to go Erica or Bronwyn. They're both really good.
Yes. They're both
I think that's, excellent. Yeah. I'm trying to think there've been other housewives, but I'm going to go with those 2.
They're really paying off. They're paying their dues this year. And I gave mine to Bose, which like, from Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Yeah. It's more like who's the new housewife, but she really kind of like topped all the other housewives anyway, not even just because she's new. Like her emotional intelligence is so on point. She is so thoughtful. She is so clear. She's direct. She's not letting triangulation happen. She's like, I think aware of the fact that Dorit was really like not a fan favorite, and she's letting that be the friendship that it makes me wonder, honestly, by the way, if they brought her in to be Dorit's friend when Dorit was struggling with fan viewership because fans really did not like her prior to the season. And now she's building up in ranks again. She's been getting a lot of good attention again. She's actually been great this
Interesting.
season, so I get that. But it's kind of like Garcelle. Like Garcelle has always been my favorite, just period, end of story has been my favorite. And so Bose, for similar reasons, quickly rose in ranks. Like I would say that Bose is the most emotionally intelligent housewife. I honestly would say that. And I've only seen her in a few episodes. So I think this says a lot, but she's incredible. Definitely a great role model. And then would you say you have would you say you have a friend of, like a favorite friend of the ones that are like the surrounding players?
Oh my gosh. The only person coming to mind is Kathy Hilton, but that's just because she's so zany. Yeah. She's just a zany housewife.
No, that's
I don't
great.
Know.
I love that. Because like, who could it even be, right? It's like there's Maylee or whatever from Salt Lake City, and there's Brittany, which I guess maybe she's a full member, but not a big fan of hers. But I was also going from Beverly Hills too, by the way. But I was thinking Jennifer Tilly, and I think the thing with what she said to Bose was like wildly ghastly. But speaking of zany, she's also a zany one, and I've been having a kind of a fun time thinking about what her life has been like since we saw her on like 90s rom-coms and so forth. So it's just been kind of fun thinking about that. She's so bizarre and funny, and also actually kind of emotionally attuned, even though she's not. Like I think she might even be potentially on the spectrum. There's something a little bit different about how she relates to people, and she looks a little bit out of water or underwater a little bit sometimes in social dynamics, but she then will say something very like clear that like cuts the tension or that moves the conversation. So I think that's been fun to watch as well. So I love that we picked zany people.
Yay. Yeah, Kathy Hilton. I'm always like, what is she going to do? I think that's always how I feel. What's her vibe right now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's she bringing into this party? And she's been more like unilaterally positive since she hasn't been a main cast member. Like as a friend of, it's been only positive content coming from her, which is good.
I think she is good in that role. And I think she can do her thing and then get out of there. And her Kyle stuff doesn't get too entwined in whatever's happening.
Yeah, exactly. Kyle's got enough going on right now. So that is good.
He does. Oof.
It's so tough. So no, this is fun. It's fun reminiscing about the year. So much happened. We watched so much content. And it's content that like I'd be watching anyway, but it is kind of fun when you're watching it with more of like a critical eye about what that means or like what people are learning when they watch it. So I feel like I've learned a lot by thinking about what they're teaching us on these shows.
Absolutely.
It's been a joy doing it with you though. I can't imagine doing it without the community that we've created together and being able to really process it. So appreciate you deeply.
Likewise. I appreciate you deeply too.
Thank you so much. Louisa, my warm and fuzzies. And I feel the same way about our dear listenership of whatever size. And we appreciate you so much. Thank you for sticking it out. And also, one day you'll be able to say that you were part of like the first, however many, you're part of the nest that started our podcast because I'm seeing big things. It's going to keep going. We have years ahead to go, but it's still, I think this has like real value to it in terms of what we could really do with it. So even if we pivoted in some way. So I'm appreciating it. And therefore I'm manifesting as part of my talking about the goals for our podcast that you all will be here. If you stick it out, you'll have been very part of the nest egg for like the nest that we came out of. We were birthed within. That's like, who's our mother bird? I guess reality TV, out of our mother goose of reality TV there.
I love it.
Our metaphors. We like just butcher the fuck out of them. That's our use.
We do the best we can.
It's always on the fly, I've had some fun. So with that, we will see you all soon. We'll see you very soon, in fact. But also, you can see us because you can look on our Patreon very shortly and see our shining faces, even if only in like the ad capacity and you don't get engaged and involved with the video episodes. I will mention that we're going to give away free memberships, like higher tier memberships to some like random people so like once you become a member, the free kind of member, we'll also be giving tiers away to random people for the first couple months. And we're also going to give name shout outs for the first 30 people to join our Patreon. We'll shout you out on our podcast. So come hang out with us and see that. We'll give you the link for it next episode. And in the meantime, we so deeply appreciate you. Check out our social medias at Dr. Reality, dr.realiTV, REALITV on TikTok, at Dr. K Pods and at Dr. Ray Pods on Instagram, Reality Test Pod on Facebook, and at Reality Test Pod on YouTube. By the way, I don't always mention this, but we also have an email, which you're so welcome to engage with, which is realitycheckpodding, PODDING, at gmail.com. Love to hear from you. Oh.
And please download us. It helps us to keep doing this thing that we love so much.
Those are the numbers that apparently get taken seriously by advertisers. So in the absence of us being even remotely competitive for advertisers, that's why Patreon has become a necessity in the meantime. But I was just telling Dr. Ray before we recorded that I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts that I often raise up, which is Two Black Girls, One Rose, and they had a throwback episode for the holidays. And they were talking, it was like several years in, and they were talking about how they still didn't have any ads. They were bringing it for free. So that was a good reminder, good check. This has only been our first 10 months. And so we're doing the right kind of path here. It doesn't need to be anywhere it's not. I don't know what the fuck I'm saying, but you get it. I was noticing I was like clumsy AF today. So it's kind of fun. It's like the like loosey goosey, clumsy. We're getting back into a transitional space this episode, and I enjoyed it.
I am always clumsy AF, so you are in good company, my dear.
I deeply disagree, but we won't get in a nice off about it.
Well, lovely seeing you.
Yes,
and
you. Bye, friends.
See you next session. Bye.